right, so Shansarin, if I can come back to you to understand what exactly is Iran's end game? Because they have been challenging US assets in the region. And many ask, have they not been the ones to provoke? What is your view?
Look, in any conflict, it's not just one side. I think there are provocations from all sides. It's not as though the Americans or the Israelis have exactly been, very cuddly with the Iranians. And the Iranians, of course, have been for many, many years, uh, you know, uh, threatening to undo Israel, have been in conflict with the Americans, and have created proxy organizations, most of which have more or less been dismantled right now around the region, and have been problematic for many of the countries around the region. Now, I would imagine that the big problem for many of the countries around the region is going to be this dichotomy, or this big gap between the imperatives of those states or the regimes and the sentiment on the street. And I think that is going to be in conflict. Yes, we will see that in state after state, that that the governments of various Arab states will want to walk the tightrope on this particular issue, neither want to take on Iran nor want to go against the United States, but the sentiment on the street will be completely different. So I think they will have their task cut out for them. And if Iran was to attack any of these countries, I think they will have a tough call to make, whether they say that we are going to hit back, or they say, well, Iran is only attacking American bases, they're not attacking our sovereignty, so we can ignore it. I don't know what they're going to do, but there is that possibility. But the thing for Iran is going to be that the end game which they will want is that, one, the regime survives and is able to maintain a control and order in Iran. That is one. And second, that they get out of this war with their dignity intact and with something left over, some negotiating space left over. Now, if the Americans and the Europeans and all their allies insist that Iran has to go in for complete capitulation on everything that is being demanded of them on the nuclear program, then it'll be a very, very tough call for the Iranian regime to accept it. I don't see how they can accept it and then expect to survive. And if they don't accept it, then the path, one of the possibilities is that you get caught in a long drawn out conflict, which I don't think anybody wants. I don't think the Israelis can afford a very long drawn out conflict. And don't go after what people are saying publicly. You can see the sentiment on the street. Nobody wants missiles raining down in Tel Aviv and in Haifa and in other Israeli cities. The Iranians don't want this constant bombardment of their military sites, their nuclear sites, and some of their residential areas, civic infrastructure. The Americans don't want to be caught in a long drawn out conflict, and none of the countries in the region want this conflict to linger on. Now, everybody wants the conflict to end, but nobody has the magic key to bring everybody onto the table and get a deal which everybody can live with, which satisfies the Israelis and the Americans on Iran's nuclear program, which leaves Iran with a modicum of dignity and some face saving. I don't know what that magic bullet is going to be. Maybe the ambassador can, delve into that. I can't.
Okay, Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, while please feel free to elaborate on that particular point, I also wanted to understand where you come from when we talk about Donald Trump having taken this decision. Would you say it was a calibrated warning, or is it a prelude to war? And what the impact of this decision would be on Donald Trump?
Well, I think let me sort of give a little background. It will take not more than a couple of minutes. First, taking off from where Sushant left, I think it's important to understand exactly the composition of Gulf. Gulf countries are not entirely Sunni. There are places, for example, Bahrain is a majority Shia population. For example, in Saudi Arabia, the oil producing area of Saudi Arabia is Shia majority. So it's not going to be very simple for these countries also to simply say that we condemn Iran, we want it out of this world, and so on. That's not practical. Even if the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia may have said it at one point of time or the other, in practical terms, he will face resistance from within. Second, if Iran attacks, it will only attack the American bases. And America has already anticipated some of it, because reports are that in Qatar, where they have a big base, they've already moved out their fighters from there a couple of days back, because Qatar is just about 30 odd kilometers away from Iran. The other thing is that Iran is not going to accept peace without honor. And this is not the first time Iran has faced America. In 80s, Iraq attacked Iran with full support of America, and the war went on for 8 years. Iran did not give up. Iran suffered hugely. So what we also have to keep in view is the fact that besides being a huge and very important civilization of this world, Iranians are very nationalistic in their attitude, and they will not, the young men of Iran, they may want regime change, but they do not want Iran to be pulverized. So they will fight. And Israel and America may have taken on more than they can handle. They may have much better armaments, may have much better fighters and so on, every kind of equipment. But as Houthis have shown, that if you have the will, you can sink their ships. So there may be more surprises in store than America may have bargained for.
Okay, quickly bringing in Sandeep on this. Sandeep, what are the outcomes that you're possibly predicting? Because Washington DC, of course, is monitoring everything. And while they say that we do not want to escalate this and Iran must call it quits here, but very unlikely that it may happen. As much as their options are far and few, but your take on the possible outcomes now?
Well, Suresh, I tend to agree with what Sushant Sareen said. The fact that the number one goal before the Iranian regime today is regime survival. They've been in power for 45 years, from 1979 onwards. They've, fought that bruising 8-year conflict with Iraq, which was again supported by the West, including the United States. They lost, there were a total of 500,000 people that died in that war between 1980 and 88. And Iran came out, it didn't collapse, the regime didn't collapse. But today you're looking at the kind of pressure that it has never faced in the past. These kind of bombings, unprecedented. It does not have control over its airspace. You have Israeli and American aircraft roaming around, bombing at will, killing their scientists and leaders. So it is a very precarious situation for the regime, and it's also survived that very massive civilian protest in 2021 and 22. But today it faces, an existential crisis. So, it might have fatally miscalculated 20 months back when they just jumped into that conflict with Israel. They activated their proxy networks, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, to attack Israel. But I think Israel played the war of attrition, and 20 months later, the war is at Iran's doorstep. Their nuclear facilities have been attacked, their scientists have been killed, their generals have been killed, their air defense networks have been destroyed, their air force has been, whatever is left of their air force has been shattered. So they are in a very, very deep crisis at the moment. So, from all accounts, it seems that the regime would rather prefer to focus on surviving this unprecedented wave of strikes and try and somehow, look for a face saver, carry out a few symbolic attacks maybe, because they are very pragmatic at the end of the day. While Trump might try to paint them as these mad mullahs with bombs, the Iranian regime has been pretty pragmatic in the last couple of ways in the way they have handled very grave provocations like the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani on Iraq. They informed the United States about through very covert channels. They informed them that
Right.
they were going to strike on US bases, so that they ensured that the bases were cleared of personnel. So it is quite possible they will do something very symbolic after this. But the options before them are extremely limited, and they will focus on rebuilding their strength and especially their shattered infrastructure, the military infrastructure on the ground, which has taken such a heavy beating in the last 8 days.